The nation is in uproar as MPs were left utterly speechless during a shocking parliamentary hearing. A senior police representative admitted that law enforcement had deliberately concealed the ethnicity of grooming gang perpetrators to avoid inflaming community tensions. This bombshell revelation has sparked outrage, with critics accusing the authorities of sacrificing justice for political correctness. And now, let's take a look at the clip that has everyone talking.
But I fear that the activity of grooming gangs is happening as we speak. As we speak, it is happening now and not being investigated by the police. And children in my area are being let down. So I just wondered what you feel about that and what the recommendations are directly to the police and the local authorities.
So we looked at 6 areas in particular, across carefully selected.
St Helens, I think.
St Helens, I was just going to say that. I assume that that's the closest one to where you are. Anyhow, what that revealed, well, there were two really important issues. One was about the absolute lack of proper data about any of this, so you couldn't distinguish one, in quotes, grooming gang from another, because the detail of both victims and perpetrators was not recorded by the police and generally not recorded by the council. So ethnicity was not recorded, for example, but nor was any other information. Now, we weren't clear exactly why, in the conduct of this study, why there were these omissions, because none of the areas did it, of the 6. And there was concern in the responses we got that perhaps police were not clear about how to ask the questions about ethnicity.
I couldn't ask a question about ethnicity. I mean, they should be sacked, shouldn't they? I mean, that's the most basic level of competence that you can have in the protection of children. We should be startled, therefore, by what you've just said. Because if there's a lack of focus in police forces on this very most serious of offending, then essentially we are... Well, I'm quite speechless that the police are taking that attitude in respect of this.
Let us know in the comments, what do you think about this? The clip ignited an immediate uproar both in Parliament and across the country. MPs were visibly stunned, with some shaking their heads in disbelief as others erupted into calls for accountability. "This is a betrayal of the British public and the victims of these heinous crimes," one MP exclaimed during the hearing. Public outrage followed just as swiftly. Social media platforms were flooded with reactions, ranging from sorrowful anger over the victims who had been failed by the system to sheer disbelief that such a policy had been allowed to stand. The hashtag number, Justice, Betrayed, began trending within hours, with thousands of posts expressing anger and demanding immediate action. Among the most vocal critics was Darren Grimes, whose viral tweet sharing the clip read, "This is beyond horrifying. Vulnerable children were sacrificed to appease woke agendas, and the authorities stood by and let it happen. Heads need to roll. Now." Advocacy groups quickly joined the chorus, demanding an independent inquiry into the handling of grooming gang cases nationwide. Many fear the issue goes far beyond what was revealed in Parliament. A spokesperson for a leading child protection charity said, "If they were willing to hide the ethnicity of suspects, what else have they buried? This cannot be swept under the rug. We need full transparency and justice for the victims." But while the public fumed, the police attempted to justify their actions. A statement released late that evening claimed that the policy was intended to maintain social cohesion and prevent unrest. However, critics immediately fired back, arguing that protecting perpetrators at the expense of victims had only deepened public mistrust. Home Secretary Suella Braverman took a hard stance, calling the revelations a national disgrace and pledging a swift and thorough investigation. "This is an unacceptable failure of justice," Braverman stated. "I will not rest until those responsible for these decisions are held accountable and until we ensure that such practices are never repeated." The scandal has also reignited broader debates about political correctness in Britain. Many are questioning whether fear of being labelled racist has paralysed institutions and undermined their ability to uphold justice. Columnist Douglas Murray, writing in The Spectator, argued, This is what happens when virtue signalling takes precedence over the rule of law. The real victims here are the children who were abandoned by the very people meant to protect them. At the same time, others cautioned against inflaming tensions further. Activists and community leaders stressed the importance of focusing on systemic failures rather than using the scandal to stigmatize entire communities. This isn't about race or religion, it's about a failure of justice, one community leader told GB News. Let's address the problem without sowing division. Meanwhile, across the globe in Beijing, Chancellor Rachel Reeves found herself at the center of a separate controversy. Reeves, who was visiting China as part of a high-profile economic delegation, came under fire for her decision to travel amidst growing economic turmoil at home. Critics slammed her for appearing out of touch, with some accusing her of abandoning her responsibilities. During a press event at Brompton's flagship store in Beijing, Reeves was asked to comment on the state of the UK's economy, which has been gripped by market instability and rising borrowing costs. Her response was curt. The fiscal rules laid out in the budget are non-negotiable. Economic stability is the bedrock for growth, and that remains my focus. This refusal to engage further only intensified the backlash. Political opponents accused Reeves of evading scrutiny, with Shadow Chancellor Mel Stride stating, "Rachel Reeves has fled to China to escape the fallout from her own disastrous budget. The markets are in disarray, families are struggling, and she's off in Beijing talking about bicycles." The optics of Reeves's trip, which included a meeting with Chinese Vice Premier He Lifeng, were further criticised as tone-deaf given the growing unease about China's role on the global stage. Commentator Madeline Grant blasted the Chancellor during an interview with GB News, calling the visit deeply embarrassing. How can the UK justify cozying up to Beijing when other countries are taking a firm stance against its human rights abuses and aggression, she said. The Labour Party defended Reeves's trip as necessary for securing Britain's economic future, emphasising the importance of maintaining pragmatic relations with China. However, even within the party, murmurs of dissent are growing. Some MPs privately expressed concern that the visit sends the wrong message, especially in light of ongoing allegations of Chinese espionage and its support for Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Back in the UK, pressure continues to mount on Reeves to return home and address the economic crisis. Analysts warn that her absence risks deepening public discontent, with many questioning whether Labour is equipped to handle the nation's challenges. As both scandals dominate headlines, the British public is left grappling with a troubling question: who can they trust to lead? The grooming gang revelations have shaken faith in law enforcement, while Reeves's actions have cast doubt on the government's priorities. For the victims of grooming gangs, the demand for justice remains paramount. One survivor, speaking anonymously to the press, said, "For years, we were ignored, silenced, and left to fend for ourselves. Now that the truth is coming out, I hope we finally see justice, not just for me, but for everyone who was let down by the system." In the coming days, Parliament is expected to debate an emergency motion calling for an independent inquiry into the handling of grooming gang cases. Meanwhile, Reeves will likely face tough questions upon her return from China, where the political fallout from her trip threatens to overshadow any potential diplomatic gains. With tensions rising and trust in institutions eroding, the UK finds itself at a crossroads. Will these scandals lead to real accountability and reform, or will they be yet another chapter in a growing catalogue of political and institutional failures? The coming weeks will be critical in determining the answers. For more updates on these explosive stories and the latest twists in British politics, hit subscribe, give this video a like, and stay tuned. We'll keep you informed on every scandal, every controversy, and every dramatic turn of events.